Yeah, so you're about 8 times likelier to get myocarditis from getting COVID than from getting the vaccine.
That's interesting.
Now,
That is not what I've read before. But also, it's like, even when we're reading these things, it's like, what are we getting this from? Was this from the VAERS report?
All right, that was right-wing podcaster Joe Rogan getting fact-checked over some claims of myocarditis. Now, myocarditis is, a fairly serious condition. It's inflammation of the heart. And so there's been a narrative that's been going around the right wing. We had Candace Owens, of course, talking about it yesterday, how, it's young men under 30 getting myocarditis from the vaccine. And that's very dangerous. That is why younger people should not take the vaccine. Now, of course, that's not true. You're actually way more likely to get myocarditis from getting COVID than you are from the vaccine. But again, this is the claim being made by right-wing hosts, right-wing websites, anti-vaxxers, and the entire anti-science movement that exists on both the left and the right. And so now, here you have the guest, Josh Zepps, who's an Aussie, and he points out, no, you're actually 8 times more likely to get myocarditis if you've had COVID. So it's actually worse for your heart. It's worse for your health. And again, getting COVID, not just bad for the heart, it's also bad for the lungs, it's also bad for the brain. Many people have actually reported symptoms of long COVID, which is a thing. Now, long COVID can cause neurological issues. I mean, think about it this way. One of the symptoms of COVID itself, or one of the possible symptoms, is loss of taste and smell. That's a neurological issue, right? Other people have had neurological issues such as brain fog, consistent loss of smell long after the initial infection is gone, headaches, physical symptoms as well, even some issues with depression. And so those are issues from having COVID. You don't get any of that from the vaccine. Now, you want to talk about the issue with younger children, which was also mentioned. Oh, yeah, children under 15, for example, in a different part of that discussion. Well, we're talking about children. Children, that's the real problem, right? Well, a new study also comes out that says that younger children specifically, who get COVID are actually now more at risk of developing diabetes later in life. And so, I mean, that's a pretty good evidence that you should get people vaccinated. You should be vaccinated. But here's the thing. You saw that when Rogan was challenged with this new information that he didn't like. That's not what I was reading. That's not what I've been hearing from the sources that I have. Well, then he immediately questioned the source. Now, what's the sourcing? Right-wing Substack articles? Erroneous studies, VAERS reporting, I've talked about VAERS before. VAERS is self-reporting, essentially. I'll get into a little bit more about that later on, but one of the sources that Rogan had on his podcast just recently that echoed a lot of anti-vaccine sentiment and actually tried to bring an air of credibility to these anti-vax arguments is Robert Malone. Now, you remember Robert Malone. Now, Robert Malone claims that he alone was the pioneer of the technology behind the COVID-19 vaccine, the mRNA. I made it, it's mine, so obviously I know that it is incredibly dangerous. Really now. So now here's the thing about Malone. Now, his research in the 1980s with mRNA, did actually help get the ball rolling on that technology. So now, why is he coming out against it? Well, it's because he's a little salty. Very, very salty, in fact. He believed that he deserved all of the credit, instead of admitting that his work was actually part of a collaborative effort to pioneer the vaccine technology that the COVID vaccines are now based off of. In fact, Malone was the first author in a 1989 paper demonstrating how RNA could be delivered into cells using lipids or fats. Now, you look at the ingredients inside the vaccine, you have polyethylene glycol, right? Now, one of that itself actually is a laxative. But then along with it, there's salts, sugars, and lipids, or fats. And so that's pretty much all that's in the vaccine, along with, of course, the mRNA, the messenger RNA. And so now, that original science paper in 1989, along with being a co-author on a 1990 science paper, showed that if you inject pure RNA and DNA into mouse muscle cells, it can lead to the transcription of new proteins. Now, the paper, in its conclusion, noted that if the same approach worked for human cells, which we find out it did, then the technology may provide alternative approaches to vaccine development. And we saw that with the COVID vaccine that is now responsible for saving many, many lives across the United States and even across the world. So now Malone afterwards goes off the rails. In fact, in 1988, he actually dropped out of graduate school and went to work at an evil pharmaceutical company called Vical. Now, he claims that both the Salk Institute and Vical had profited from his work and prevented him from further pursuing his research into mRNA technology. Now, a Salk Institute spokesperson said that nothing in their records would substantiate Malone's allegations, but he calls it his entire situation with both companies, quote, intellectual rape. Great. He also claims that he had been written out of history involving the COVID vaccines and the mRNA technology, which, by the way, curiously, he seems to be against. Very strange. Very strange. So now I bring up Malone, as I mentioned, because he was featured not just on Joe Rogan's podcast, but also on Steve Bannon's podcast, and a lot of other, he's been making the rounds on right-wing media. And right-wing media, of course, they look at his, credentials. And it's not like he's not a smart person. It's not like he's not accomplished, and somebody who's able to break down scientific concepts, even for idiots, quite well. And so now he's going around, but the reason that he's doing this is that why he's being anti-vax without actually technically being anti-vax, because he claims, I'm not against vaccines. I just think that there's some major problems with this COVID vaccine that I helped develop the platform technology from. I guess it's because they didn't include me, right? Right? It had to have been. No, this is personal. I think that this is personal. I think, again, no doubt his research helped contribute to the mRNA technology, but then the guy gets greedy. He got a big head, he got super salty, that he didn't get the credit, that he didn't get enough clout. And that's the issue. As noted in numerous fact checks, development of today's COVID-19 vaccines was built on the work of many scientists and would not have been possible without other discoveries that cleared away major hurdles. Now, this guy has a major problem with Catalin Carrico. So now, a early 2000s breakthrough from the University of Pennsylvania was spearheaded by Weissman and Carrico, who uncovered a way to keep the immune system from attacking the injected mRNA. And so that's one of the major problems they had in the beginning. Well, okay, so we've got this mRNA, we could put it into mouse cells and maybe use that as the delivery system for vaccines, but it keeps getting rejected by the body. Well, we've got to solve that issue, so then we can, once we do, we can actually use that technology to create a vaccine. So now, they figured that out without his help, And he gets super salty and says, no, this is my crowning achievement. I paved the way for this vaccine. I didn't create the vaccine, but I paved the way for it by this technology. And you didn't give me any credit. You stole my work. How dare you? You stole my work, which, by the way, is terrible in killing people. I mean, what other reason would he have to attack what he is claiming to be his own crowning achievement, if not to fuck someone else over because you feel a little bit slighted? Again, I would never underestimate human pettiness. And that's what this is. Pettiness. So now back to Joe Rogan, right? Now, Joe Rogan, again, has been getting information from this guy, from right-wing blogs, from probably Substack articles, from Tucker Carlson, from nonsense sources. All right? And so now, when challenged with factual information about myocarditis, isn't it funny that as soon as he hears anything that challenges his right-wing bubble, he decides to move the goalposts? Oh, that's not what I read. What about children? We're talking about children. No, you weren't talking about children. Moving the goalposts. And again, I mentioned this because he lives in a right-wing bubble. The guy very rarely talks to lefties or scientists anymore. Now, Josh Zepps, I'm glad that he had Zepps on the show to go in and challenge him. Even so, after that interview, Joe Rogan still went and pushed back and said, and doubled down and said, oh, no. That's not the real information. No. I still think that the VAERS data shows that it's more dangerous to take the vaccine and get myocarditis when you're under 30. You know what's funny is that back before he went super right wing, back when he actually did talk to lefties, talk to Bernie Sanders, for example, he actually had a more interesting show. And sometimes he would even come with good takes. I remember him talking with, again, Dave Rubin, and then clowning him on his show. And I loved it. And clowning other people on, right-wingers on immigration. But now he's cut off just about all actual leftists from his podcasts and went hard right. And as a result, he has become a dumber person for it. Almost indistinguishable from Alex Jones. And that's the problem with the right-wing bubble. And it's also one of the problems with, of course, casting yourself as a so-called independent thinker. Isn't it weird how being an independent thinker these days is more, nothing more than being anti-vax, anti-science, and a little transphobic? Isn't that a little strange? And by the way, they also include being anti-establishment. Now, that's the thing. Now, I'm against the current right-wing political and economic establishment because it puts corporate profits over human lives. I'm pro-vaccine because I care about human lives. I'm pro-Medicare for all, anti-death penalty, anti-greed, anti-corruption, pro-labor, pro-decarbonization of our economy, pro-direct democracy, all of that stuff. Now, none of that contradicts the science. In fact, my positions are backed up by science and factual information. So that's the thing, right? Yes, I'm anti-establishment. And you could be anti-establishment and not be anti-fact. And unfortunately, there are too many people who identify as anti-establishment that also have become anti-fact. And it's because those facts tend to come from places that they don't like anymore. For example, corporations or the government. People we don't like, sides that we don't like. Now, I don't think the source should matter if it's factual information, even if it's a source that I don't like. If Donald Trump's coming out and saying, vaccine's good. Well, he's right. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh no, now that Donald Trump's in favor of vaccine bad. No, it has to do about facts, guys. That's it. I mean, again, he's out there touting the vaccine. I'm giving him credit for this. And he should get some credit for it because he's right. He's actually on the facts, because that's what should matter more than anything. But here's the thing too. I understand that in those situations, in our polarized environment, it's kind of hard to do. It's a very, very human reaction, which is to say, not entirely logical at all. At the end of the day, Joe Rogan, people like Joe Rogan, do not want to believe in information that challenges his current right-wing worldview, which is heavily influenced by people like Alex Jones in that right-wing bubble that he exists in. And of course, as a result of the audience that he has cultivated. So he moves the goalposts and he doubles down despite being told actual data. The myocarditis study that he references only relies on VAERS data. Now, VAERS data is a useful tool, but it's also got a lot of issues here because it basically allows for anonymous reporting. So you can go and say whatever you want on VAERS data. Yeah, I took the vaccine and I grew a second head. You can report that to VAERS. Weird. You know, you can report that the vaccine turned you into the Incredible Hulk. You can report that. That's fair. Did that mean that actually happened? No, of course not. That's not what happened at all. And so it's not designed to be anything more than a way to see specific trends in reporting. Now, if scientists, if they see certain trends among these reports, then they can do some investigation. They can kind of follow up on it, right? And so it's useful in the fact that it's a research aid. Now, in itself, by itself, VAERS proves nothing, very, very little. That doesn't mean it can't be helpful. And the fact is that, yes, while there is a very small risk of myocarditis happening among younger men, aged 30 and under, who have taken the Pfizer vaccine, there are follow-ups that have shown that those incidences are incredibly rare and that the benefits of the vaccine still far outweigh the risks because of what can happen when you contract or if you contract COVID without being vaccinated. So don't listen to people like Joe Rogan, who admittedly says, I'm a dumbass. That's what he says. He's an entertainer. He is not a doctor. He is not somebody who knows, medicine. Don't listen to him. Listen to actual medical professionals that have done their due diligence and research